Welcome back to Yoshi Entertainment, everybody. So, just recently, something very sad took place, and this situation I really wanted to talk about. It was weighing heavily on me. This is part of what makes Yoshi Entertainment what it is. Talking about and promoting the truth, calling out these crazy mindsets, these delusional and heinous actions, behaviors, and ways of thinking that have been promoted and have run amok in our societies, in our communities, and in the churches. So just recently, a young woman by the name of Mica Miller, who was married to a pastor by the name of John Paul Miller, who's the pastor at a church called Solid Rock in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was found unalived in the Lumber River State Park in North Carolina by what they thought was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, a lot of people thought that her husband had did this, that it was a setup, essentially, that there was foul play, and we're going to explain why later in the video, why they first thought that. Unfortunately, they just released an audio of her mentioning that she was going to unalive herself, that was her intentions after the things that she had been put through, and that she just wanted to be in a place and leave that audio so that her family would be able to find her body afterwards. Now, here's a rough timeline of what happened, only going back to a few months ago. Allegedly, this young woman filed for a divorce just right in February. Allegedly, the divorce case was dismissed on February the 13th, and literally like a week later, he filed for separation. What it instantly sounds like to me is that he wanted to file for divorce, he wanted to file for separation because he felt like that was going to put him in a better position. That if she filed for divorce, that was going to put him at a disadvantage. Now, according to a sworn affidavit from her sister by the name of Sierra Francis, which it says right here in this article, Mica was admitted to a Center for Mental Health, and I don't believe at all that that woman had mental health issues, because I know people are going to use that and say, oh, well, that's why she deleted herself. No, she was going through extreme abuse, reoccurring abuse at the hands of her husband. She was driven to this point by his maliciousness. Allegedly. Y'all know I have to say that. We'll get into that some more later on in this video. According to, like I said, her sister in this article, when she was checked into that facility, he had her personal items removed from the home that they were sharing. According to her sister, he did this without Mica's knowledge. Essentially, he blindsided her with doing this. I want people to understand how screwed up that is. While somebody is in a mental facility, allegedly, instead of being concerned about them, praying for them, hoping the best for them, their spouse is moving things out of their home without their knowledge, without their consent, without their control. And make no mistake, he did this because it was a convenience to him. If he cared anything about that woman, he would have waited until she got out of that facility, so they could both come to an agreement on what they finally wanted to do and how to move that stuff out of the house. Also, according to her sister, she expressed the abuse and violence against her by her husband to others, including family members and members of the church congregation. Now, here is where the proof that he forced her into this position. He backed her into a corner. He pushed her to the place that she was right before she did what she did. Allegedly, before she was admitted into that mental facility, she was gathering evidence, essentially to prove what she had been saying, his abuse towards her, his lack of a good character, him being allegedly involved with other people, and, as I quote from this article, associates he paid off or blackmailed. Allegedly. You guys know I have to say that. Continuing with the timeline, allegedly in March, she recounted incidents of a man who was following her and harassing her, allegedly letting air out of her tires, if you will. Allegedly, there were police reports. She went to the police, which is what everybody loves to say you should do. Go to the police, file a police report, and she did that. The entire situation, being in her car, hearing a pop, noticing that there's something in the tire and the air going out. But go figure, surprise, surprise, the police couldn't do anything because they claimed she didn't have enough evidence. Also, she named a suspect who might have been the one responsible for this, allegedly, because when she pulled up to a gas station, some guy came up to her at the pump trying to talk to her, and she said, basically, take a hike. Allegedly, even Mica's brother had reported that she told him that her own husband, after they started this separation process, had been stalking her. This woman made numerous police reports about the stuff that was happening to her weeks leading up to this. Tracking devices in her car, allegedly. Tires being slashed. She cried out for help when she was being abused by this guy who clearly is protected by not only the community, but the church as well. That particular church. And this is one of the parts about this that pisses me off the most. Society, the community, even police officers, and people like lawyers and judges, even sometimes churches and churchgoers. They really like to make it seem like abuse is so easy to get away from. It's so easy to escape. This is somebody's life and well-being that we're talking about here. And it really does make me angry when people make it seem like, oh, well, if you're being abused, for instance, if your husband is putting his hands on you, just call the police. They really act like that actually works in favor of women these days. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Do you know how many times people have to keep filing police reports, keep calling the police before something is actually done about a person putting their hands on another person? And even if they get arrested, they get bailed out to go on doing whatever they've been doing just days before. Even with mental, emotional, or psychological abuse, which I do believe he put her through, who do you go to tell those things to? And when you do, what is the advice they're going to give you? Because 9 times out of 10 that I've seen with these kind of situations, they just tell you to go back. Oh, don't worry about it. Just forgive the person. Just pray about it. I said this in a previous video. Sometimes the answer to the prayer is escape. Now, allegedly, according to Mica's brother, she was going through so much that she told him that she was actually afraid of him and that she wanted to get away from him, that she wanted to escape, and she literally did everything that she possibly could. All the avenues and channels that people tell women in these situations you're supposed to do: call the police, file a police report, do this, gather evidence. She did her absolute best to do that. Now, something I forgot to mention earlier is that allegedly there were emails that they found that Pastor Miller was sending, allegedly, that was basically proof that he had sent somebody to slash those tires, essentially sent people to harass her after she decided to divorce him. She also wanted spousal support, which she had the right to request after all the hell that he put her through. But this is a situation where clearly he didn't want her to divorce him. He wanted to abuse her, wanted to have his cake and eat it too. Didn't want to do right, but didn't want her to leave either. And then essentially tried to punish her for trying to leave him. Now, as the timeline in the article states, and if I'm not mistaken, the February separation that was filed wasn't dismissed until it was about mid-March. And only about a week after that, she started making posts on Facebook that were very telling about what she was going through. Basically, that she had been going through some crazy stuff for quite some time now, and that she was trying to keep her circle very small because she needed people around her to help her through what she was going through. She even went so far as to try and encourage other people who were going through what she was going through, because that is what people do who are going through it. When people are going through things, life is knocking them down, people keep knocking them down despite how they're trying to fix the situation or get out of the situation. They are sympathetic to people who are also going through those things. They will have the kind of disposition where they're like, I might not be able to get out of this situation. I might not be able to control what's going on, but I'm definitely going to give some advice to somebody else who might be going through the same thing. If I can help somebody else based off of what I'm going through and they're going through the same thing, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I believe she was doing, along with trying to show people that she was trying to get help. Now, she posted something, once again, this is the other part of this that really pisses me off. People love to bash people about getting a divorce, but they don't want to bash the person that's the reason for why the divorce is happening. I do believe God wants us to avoid divorce if it can be avoided. Although at the same time, because two things can be true at the same time, He does not want us to be in a relationship with a person that is quite literally deleting us. He does not want us in a situation, in a relationship around people who first don't love Him and respect Him, and then second don't love and respect us. He does not want us in a relationship where the person is habitually putting us through abuse. He does not want that for His children, for His sons or His daughters. That is the truth, point blank, period. Although that truth is being overshadowed by these abusive-minded individuals on the internet who are involved with religion. They have made religion their God, not the actual God, Yeshua. They've made religion their God, their organized groups, their pastors. who they put on this pedestal so far, that despite what he does, the heinous actions he commits, they will not say anything. They will not do anything. I told y'all before, if I'm ever in a church and your pastor is doing something he ain't got no business, I'm snitching. And it's not even snitching at that point. It's just doing the right thing. He's mishandling the kids. He's screwing over his wife. The police will be called. It is so ungodly to cover for somebody, I don't care who it is, in their sin towards other people, in their abuse towards other people. That's why a lot of people, especially women and children, don't want to go to these churches today, because these churches, a lot of them, not all of them, love to cover for their pastor and other deacons and men in the church in their wrong, in the crimes that they commit. They do it under the guise of righteousness. Oh, that's the man of God. You can't say anything about him. How many times have you heard, touch not my anointed, used so many times out of context, especially when it concerns a pastor who is abusing some woman or somebody's children? God is going to hold them accountable first for the abuse that they put those people through. The blood of the innocents is on their hands. And that doesn't just go for the children, that also goes for adults, young women, young men who are innocent, who they abused. God will hold them accountable. And she was right when she posted this, when she posed that question. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that? He hates it. He doesn't like it at all. And I know she posted that also because the first thing I know for a fact, because I know how church people think, some of them, not all of them, the first thing out of those members' mouths was, well, you can't divorce the pastor. That's the pastor. You can't divorce. The Lord doesn't like divorce. You're going to be in trouble if you divorce him. That probably was one of the first things that came out of those people's mouths, because they also said that them people knew what he was doing to her, allegedly. That allegedly he would do stuff disrespectful to her in front of them. And they watched it go on for years and didn't say anything. Allegedly. And as far as I'm concerned, those church members who did that, who sat there and watched that women suffer for years and didn't say anything, especially the ones who co-signed his behavior, they will also reap the spiritual consequences of those actions, because they're just as raggedy as he was for doing that. Mica was crying out for help, and she was also trying to promote the truth to other women, like I said, who had been going through what she was going through, so that if they were hit with it like how she was, they would know what to do. They would know how to respond, and they would know that God is not going to be mad at them for trying to get away from this spouse who is abusing them, who is probably going to delete them, because that's usually what the cycle of abuse leads to. At some point in time, something happens, somebody snaps, and then somebody ends up deleted. Continuing on with the timeline, it was in mid-April when I believe they're speaking of Mica, who filed for separation from John Paul Miller, and the hearing for the separation was set in June the 5th. Now, I get it, the legal system works the way that it does, but in these situations, I don't understand why this kind of stuff takes months to go through. Like I said, I know this is a process, but there are some things that the judicial system has been needed to change and reform. But that's too much like right, I guess. On April the 25th, allegedly, was when Mica served her husband the divorce papers, and her sister even mentioned that she was happy, thinking that maybe this was looking better, the situation was getting hopeful, that maybe they'd be able to get out of this situation, get her out of this situation, and that things would be turning for the better. Allegedly, according to the affidavit, put in the affidavit, according to her sister, Mica told her sister that if she ended up with a bullet in her head, that it would not be because of her, it would be because JP, John Paul Miller. 2 days after the divorce papers were served to her husband, this woman ends up deleted in that park in North Carolina. Now, the reason why people felt like it was him that did it initially was because, first of all, again, his treatment of her, his alleged treatment of her, the way he talked about her to his own congregation, and the message, the way he carried on during that message, y'all, like nothing had ever happened, and then waited to the end of the sermon to just briefly mention, like it was an afterthought, that his wife had been deleted via gunshot wound to the head, and that he wasn't going to talk about it in the church, that he didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, and then claims that she had mental health issues. Oh, that he tried to help her so much. Y'all, I done told y'all about that former Bird app. They were not having it on there. They said, buddy, we already know what's going on. You ain't fooling nobody. Both men and women have came forward to basically confront this man and call him out for what he refuses to acknowledge, to call him out for being such a malicious coward that he can't even own up to what he did, allegedly. People were also pointing out that allegedly he may have had dealings with this young woman since she was like 15 coming to his church. They were alleging that he possibly groomed her. And this is why, y'all, I fight so hard against these perverted, sick-minded age gap relationships. It is wrong for you to be a grown behind individual dating a teenager, messing around with a teenager, even if they're just 18. They're barely an adult by the government's legal standard. Mentally, they are not an adult. They are still very much child-minded. So for you to date somebody that's 10 plus years, 15 plus years, 20 years younger than you as a grown behind individual that's no longer in your 20s, past at least the age of 25, that's just sick-minded and perverted. And when people call this out, they are instantly labeled haters, jealous. And that's another thing that disturbs me about the situation. So a person calling out a grown individual, like I said, blatantly taking advantage of somebody younger, because that's what these relationships are. One party is taking advantage of a more naive, inexperienced party, because that's what it is. And you're calling them jealous because you think they want to be in that situation. It's like, tell me you're just as perverted as that older individual in that relationship is, or you wish you were that older individual taking advantage of that young person without telling me. What does this have to do with this situation, you might ask? It factored into the alleged abuse. It factored into the alleged grooming. Getting a hold of a young teenager's mind before they are the adulthood age. We've defined grooming on this channel before. And then having them go on to do things that they probably would not have done had not they got to them in those very vulnerable years. This is why I said in a previous video, we should shame anybody, anything, any institution that promotes these kind of relationships, that promotes older individuals messing with people who are half their age, young enough to be their daughter, multiple years younger than them, 10, 15 plus, etc. We should shame individuals, people, institutions that promote grown individuals messing with teenagers, underage individuals, people who are barely legal, if you will, people who are still in the early stages of their mental development, learning life, experiencing life, but they want to mess with them and they're in their freaking 30s, 40s, and 50s. We need to shame those kinds of mindsets and behaviors so that we can do the best that we can as a community to try and prevent these kind of things from happening. Because it takes a community. We have to look out for each other. We can't be all out for ourselves only. And I'm saying that because it seems like to me this young woman only had her family. The society failed her. Her community failed her. The church definitely failed her, especially them church members. The judicial system failed her. The only people she really had in her corner, other than God, was her family. Now, speaking of her family, her sister put out some statements basically saying that she didn't care what anybody else said, that her sister was, and I quote, a joyful, loving woman who did not deserve the abuse she endured. And she also said in another statement, and I quote, please do not listen to the false stories being shared about her, end quote. Which basically meant, once again, when he got up there and tried to make that woman seem like she was crazy and that's why she self-deleted allegedly. Again, she is basically saying with this statement that her sister did not have mental health issues. She was not crazy. That is a label that they slap on people when they won't do what people are trying to force them to do. When someone is being abused and they push back and people get mad because they pushed back. And people should also not spread that narrative because it's an easy scapegoat of an excuse for John Paul Miller. Every time you say, oh, she had mental health issues, you're giving him an out for what he allegedly did. He doesn't have to admit, oh, I pushed her to this point. I said things, I was abusive. If everybody just agrees that it was mental health, like I'm sure he wanted people to. So he doesn't have to admit what he did, allegedly. Like I said, the people on Twitter were keeping it 100. They have no issue with that, especially when an injustice like this is going on. They were also basically saying that because of what he allegedly did to her, she might have pulled the trigger, but he may as well have. Being surrounded by a bunch of people who do not have the authentic and honest and genuine love of God. Instead, they have some other kind of worship of their religion and their pastor. And then being in a relationship with somebody who you have gone through years of abuse, suffered years of abuse at the hand of, not being able to get help the way you needed to despite going through all the proper channels will most definitely take a toll on you, making you feel like there's no other way out. Although, once again, one of the reasons why my channel exists is to encourage people to keep going on and keep doing the right thing, along with promoting the truth and God. And I'm not making those statements out of a place of ignorance. I know that life is raggedy, and I know there are a lot of people who have been put in situations that they didn't put themselves in. They didn't ask to be put in. They didn't do anything to deserve to be put there. Sometimes life happens, and sometimes it's horrible. It seems unbearable. Although, once again, one of the reasons why I feel like I'm put here is to encourage people to find some kind of reason to keep going. Sometimes it might not even be you, because of you. It might be because of something else, or maybe I can help somebody else. If I can get to the other side of this, I can help somebody else with the same situation that they might be going through. It's not going to be easy, trust me. Although, like I said before, the best thing I feel like I can do is encourage people to hang in there, despite how hard it gets, even when you want to throw in the towel. And of course, to pray that God encourages people to keep going. Sometimes the encouragement has to be divine for you to be able to tap into it. That's just my thoughts on that matter. This is also why I promote so heavily that we have to be a community. We have to be there for each other. Because when you are surrounded by people who are actually loving you, treating you right, praying for you, encouraging you, supporting you, instead of adding to the hell you're already going through, having that community helps. Now, I've also mentioned before, this last thing I want to talk about, what church you should go to. Being mindful of whose church you put your membership in. And I'm aware of the fact that when you are a child growing up in the church, you don't exactly have control over that. You go wherever your parents go. But as you get older and you become an adult, you've got to be mindful of where you're putting your membership in. Whose leadership you're submitting yourself to. Because some of these people, the way they are running their churches is a cult. They are promoting so much ungodliness, so much disrespect, so much misogyny, the abuse that runs amok behind closed doors. And people have also been calling this out. And then basically, like I said, slapping this label of religion, of, oh, well, the pastor knows best. You can't take the pastor down because that's the pastor. The disguises that they dress this up as is absolutely disgusting to me. And again, God is going to hold them accountable, make no mistake. Although people need to understand, y'all need to understand that some of these pastors out here, they are not pastors. They are wolves in sheep's clothing, like how some people have been describing them. They're not here to help you further your relationship with God. They're not here to help you deepen your relationship with God and lead you to Christ and lead you on the way. Because that's what a pastor is. He is a leader in this journey, this spiritual journey. Some of these men out here who call themselves pastors are about as wicked as they can get. Some of these pastors out here, their goal is quite literally to pimp the people of God, to take advantage of them, to hurt them, to use them as an outlet for their lustful, ungodly, sinful, lustful desires, to monetize off of the people of God, not to actually help people. So we've got to be very, very, very prayerful. Got to use wisdom and discernment, which comes with the Holy Spirit. And we also have to really be paying attention, really be vigilant with where we choose to go to church. There are some churches out there where they're doing the right thing. I spoke about that literally in the previous video with the guy who was a pastor over there in Pennsylvania who almost got shot and God basically jammed the gun. And I said that that's the kind of church I'd want to go to. But again, we have to be very mindful where we go to worship, where we go to church. We got to be, like I said, vigilant. Now, as I've said before in the past, let's try to refrain from taking away from these situations that are very horrible, messed up, and disturbing and saddening. Let's try to refrain from taking away, oh, I can't trust all pastors, or that all churches and all church members are awful people, or that they won't help you whenever you're in trouble, because that's not the truth. I believe it's getting harder and harder to find them, but they're out there, like I said. Anyways, Y'all let me know what y'all think about this and how y'all feel down in the comments below respectfully. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all all have a very blessed, beautiful, and safe day.